Hi everybody, welcome to another Table Talk. So in my continuing series, Intermediate Park Jet series, setup series, I wanted to just briefly discuss a summary of my lessons learned and my thoughts about KF or Kline Fogleman airfoils. I've done a lot of discussing and written blog posts about KF airfoils, so I'm not going to go too in depth there. Just talk about some different things that I've learned and experimented with over the years. As you're transitioning from a simple sort of profile style park jet up to something a bit more advanced, intermediate to advanced. In my opinion, my experience, Kline Fogleman or KF airfoils are one of the simplest yet most performance enhancing additions that you can make to a park jet, and they're just extra bits of foam, so they're very inexpensive, and you can do all the experiment to your heart's content out at the field. It doesn't cost you a lot of money to manipulate the size and shape and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm just going to go over sort of my lessons learned. I obviously am a big fan of KF4 airfoils. They just are what I like. They help my jets perform the way that I want them to perform. There's a almost like a couple of factions, I guess. Those that are big on KF2, those that are big on KF4. So I don't want to create any kind of argument there, because I do think from my experience it depends on what you want out of your park jet, which is the most important. You set up your park jet the way you want, and sometimes certain airplanes are a bit different than others. So my first experience with a park jet, or my very first park jet, was an RC Powers F-35 version 2, which at the time was free and now is free again. I just found out on their website. So I'll have a link to that down below. And I went with KF2 airfoils because they were recommended as the best beginner setup. So what I found on that plane was, especially as I got into turns, if I got going a little bit slow, which, as a beginner, I was probably a bit scared of flying too fast, what I would find the plane would do, and I'll just use this little baby plane here, it's a little easier, is I would get into turns and the plane would start to feel a bit mushy, or it would just, kind of have like a mind of its own, and it wouldn't respond to the control inputs that I was giving it as quickly as I wanted it to. So because I was a beginner, I was tense, I was nervous, so I'd start getting slap happy on the sticks, and the next thing I'd be over controlling the plane, and shortly thereafter something, either I'd scare the living daylights out of myself and keep flying the plane, or something else more tragic would happen and I would crash. So anyway, I didn't have the best of experience with KF2 on that plane, but it served me well, and after it getting repaired so many times, it got to the point it was too heavy to fly, and I recycled it. One of the next setups that I experimented with for a while, there was kind of a trend going on in the park jet community where people were using what was coined KF 3.5, which was essentially 6mm foam on the top, 3mm foam on the bottom, and there were some people who said that it was the best of both worlds of KF2 and KF4. Personally, I would disagree with that. I found that it was essentially just another KF2 airfoil, which I think makes sense, because if you have twice as high a step on the top as you do on the bottom, it's still going to lean way closer to KF2 tendencies. So just talking briefly about thicknesses, this plane is actually one of the last planes that I built out of Depron 6mm thick. Early in the early days when Depron was still readily available, I built a lot of my planes using 6mm Depron for the KF airfoils, and those work just fine. Probably a bit more drag than what I'm using right now. Most of my airplanes now I use paperless Dollar Tree foam or Adams Ready board. So when you take the paper off both sides, it's about 4.5mm thick. And I find that gives me just the right step to reduce the drag a little bit, but give me the stability, wind penetration, that sort of thing. So I definitely wouldn't go thicker than the wing, than the foam that you're using for your wing. On my 100-mile-an-hour park jet, which I will be building probably later this year, I'm actually going to experiment by going down to as thin as 3 millimeters on my KF4 airfoils, just to see if that does reduce the drag, but still give me a little bit of stability so that the plane, you know, can have some serious giddy up and still be stable. So yeah, so the KF 3.5 to me wasn't really much of a winner. I didn't feel a whole lot of difference compared to the KF2. Yeah, so I use KF4, equal thicknesses top and bottom, and I use actually sort of a sharp leading edge. There's, again, like many things to do with park jets, there's sort of two camps on that. I know some people prefer a more of a rounded edge. I just find doing this sort of sharp, symmetrical edge is a lot easier to do for me, and it's just been a winning combination for me for many, many years, so that's why I do that. I've also, linked down below, I have written a very detailed blog post on KF airfoils with some great videos there by people that are smarter than me, so I would strongly encourage you to go down and have a look at that article, watch those videos if nothing else. Very, very educational. I have been, and you know, this is pretty much the trend now in park jets. On the top, I have been extending my KF airfoil out along the leading edge root extension or the intakes, depending on the type of the plane. So that's another thing. Although what I have found is that when I try to fly inverted, and I'm a terrible inverted flyer anyway, so maybe that's why. But when I fly inverted, because now I've just got KF on the bottom and not on this part, I find it does sometimes tend to pull the nose down. But anyway, it could be some other problem that I don't know about. Like I said, I'm not a terribly strong inverted flyer, so that could be the problem. My experience with this is the NAMC MiG-35B. When I was part of NAMC, I was responsible for the testing and design of this plane, or I was part of the testing and design, I should say. In the MiG-35A, we did a lot of testing just with KF2, just as, you know, so we could say this is how our plane flies with KF2. And what I found with this plane, and again, we were looking to design a plane that was quick, agile, and precise. When I flew it with KF2 only, I found it was literally about a 15% reduction in precision in flying. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it would get a bit floaty in the turns and just didn't respond as quickly and efficiently as what we were looking for. So for all of our planes, NAMC planes, we always recommended either going with no KF or going with KF4 and not messing around with KF2. But that was, you know, because we were designing for a specific thing. You can do whatever you want. Now, sometimes it also depends on the plane. This is the Ground Control RC F-22 Mini version 3. I'll have a link to Ground Control RC's YouTube channel on his Patreon site down below. I've been helping him and testing this. Just a super fun little plane to fly. I flew it a lot. I think probably 50, 60 flights with KF2 only. And I didn't see some of those, I didn't see the depth of negativity in KF2 with this plane as I have with some other planes. So again, sometimes it depends not just on what you like, but it could depend on the plane. So you know, it's good you know, good to keep an open mind. Obviously, I'm a big fan and big proponent of KF4, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't experiment with KF2 on your intermediate park jet as you start to progress. I actually also flew this plane, the MiG-29 version 1, obviously in full size, and I experimented putting KF4s on it, and it actually gave the plane a much more locked-in feel. So I'll have a link to the video that I did, the walk-around video that I did on this plane, discussing all of my my modifications. One thing, if you do decide to go the KF4 route, a couple of lessons that I've learned. Fortunately, I didn't learn them the hard way, but they did kind of take my heartbeat away, a few of my heartbeats away. Is you want to make sure as much as possible that not only are your KFs are all uniform in size. Because if you have one wing where your KFs are a little bit further back than the other, it's going to affect the lift, and your airplane is either going to roll or yaw one way or the other. And additionally is when you put the top and the bottom, the top and bottom KFs on your wing, if you're using KF4, is you really want to focus on making sure that these two trailing edges, top and bottom, are as absolutely equal as possible. The reason being is that if one of them is a millimeter or two even further behind, then it's going to cause issues with that one wing wanting to do something crazy, or you'll get situations where as the plane accelerates or decelerates, it'll be doing some crazy type things. And an easy way to check that is you can just take a pin, after you've built the plane, just take a pin and put it right along the trailing edge, poke it down through, and see where it ends up. If there's you want to make sure if you're going to err when you're building the plane, it's better to err having them a little big and you can trim than having so if your top one ends up being longer, trim that off a little bit and get them evened up as possible, and then because once you do, it really does enhance the flight performance. All right, folks. So there we go. That's kind of in a nutshell my lessons learned, experiences, testing and playing around with KF4 airfoils in my park jet career. Again, I strongly encourage you. Please go down below and check out the links. There's a lot more information there. Some of it by people a lot smarter than me, and hopefully you'll be able to learn even more if you're considering KF airfoils for your intermediate park jet. So thanks very much for watching. Blue skies, calm winds to everyone. Park jet noise, the other sound of freedom, baby. Take care.